glad you could join us for today's Fast Path session. My name is Frank Vukovits, joined by my colleague, Meyer. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how the tools from Fast Path Assure can take you from security zero to security hero, flying through the air, taking through all your security problems you might have. So a little bit of background on Alex and myself. We've been both working with the product a long time. Actually, I've been with it for 20 years now, going back to Exapta 3.0. Work a lot at FastPath now with customers helping with their security audit needs, along with the many audit partners and audit firms around the world using our tool as well. Alex, why don't you briefly introduce yourself as well, please?
Sure. My name is Alex Meyer. I handle all of our Microsoft integrations here at FastPath, Microsoft MVP and business apps, and I have a blog that I write on pretty frequently about all things Microsoft. So happy to be here today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, a lot of good content there on your blog. And you also got a 4th edition now of your book on the security audit field manual for Dynamics 365 and AX. So cool. All right. Well, we got 30 minutes here actually now, 28 and a half to turn you folks from regular folks into superheroes. So let's talk about what FastPath can do to help address your security, audit, and compliance needs. We have 4 modules. We're going to try to touch upon all 4 today at some form or fashion, but really we're answering 3 questions. If you want to be a superhero at your company, when it comes to security, you need to be able to tell your teams there and your executives need to have confidence that they know who has access to your systems, what are they doing with that access, and where's your company vulnerable. And I'd actually put a 4th question on there. FastPath actually answers now too, Alex, and that's where are we spending our license money with Dynamics and how are we using those licenses? We're seeing more and more customers that have over-provisioned their security have to pay a lot more for their licenses, and we'll talk more about that. But really, those core 3 questions can turn you into a superhero at your company. And then if you can also answer the licensing questions, you become the double superhero, if you will. Extra big cape there. So briefly, for those of you who don't know about FastPath, we've been around for going 18 years. We are a Microsoft ISV. We have over 1,500 customers, 6 different continents. Lots and lots of members of our FastPath community. It continues to grow. And then one other thing we'd like to mention as well, that we work with the world's leading accounting firms, audit firms, consulting firms, are using FastPath to provide solutions. The big 4 you see on there, the Protiviti's, Grant Thornton's, RSM's, are providing services to clients using the tools from FastPath you're going to see today for external audits, internal audits, security engagements, implementations where they need to look at security as well. So we're proud of that relationship we have with the accounting and audit community and how they work with FastPath and give us feedback for our product and help make it better as well. So this is what it's going to look like when we get to demo. This is a SaaS-based solution running on Microsoft Azure out in the cloud. If you're going to be a superhero, you got to fly through the clouds. So you better have a solution that lets you do that. And FastPath does that, powered by Microsoft Azure. And Alex is going to walk you through the screens here in detail here in a short second. And then if you happen to have other applications in your environment, maybe a Salesforce for CRM or a Workday for HR besides Dynamics, we like to point out that we work with other applications as well. The tools you're going to see today actually work with these applications on the screen. But more importantly, when it comes to segregation and duties, to be a true superhero, you need to look cross-application. And at FastPath, the tools we have you're going to see today are built and designed to allow for cross-application, segregation and duty analysis as well. With those applications you see in the bottom. And then we also have integrations to many of those applications as well. The Jiras, the Workdays, or the Workivas, and the like, Zendesk, ServiceNow for that matter, to integrate into ticketing systems as well. So good stuff there. The other thing to keep in mind, not just with Dynamics, but also how your tools security-wise work with Microsoft. We like to talk about enterprise security at FastPath. Be a superhero. Keep the external threats out and minimize your internal threats. We're going to address those internal threats. The Microsoft 365 V5 SKUs provide great external security protection, but to have true enterprise security, you need to combine us with that to have inside and outside threats mitigated from a big picture perspective. Bottom line is, when to think FastPath, you hear some of these terms. Maybe you're publicly traded, have to worry about Sarbanes-Oxley or SOX. Maybe you just wonder about user access reviews, emergency access. Maybe you're on the IPO path. All these are different terms. If you hear in your company, it's a good time to be thinking FastPath. And then finally, real quick, how we price and support our product. Free support and training for all our customers. That's always been the case, and we continue to stick by that today. We're a software-only company. We don't offer any services. We work with great implementation partners and borrowers to help in that regard. And then finally, we price our solution based on the number of Dynamics licenses and the type of licenses your company owns. Once you purchase a FastPath subscription, it's a site license. You can have as many FastPath users as you would like. And then we do have for bundle up and the like, as we talk about these different modules. We have different pricing based on which modules you purchase and how long the subscription is. But again, it's all driven by how many Dynamics licenses you own with Microsoft. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to the real superhero at FastPath, and that's my colleague, Alex Meyer. Alex, if you want to walk us through a demo, we're going to start today with our Security Designer module. So we got about 23 minutes to cover 4 modules. I talk fast, but there's no way we're going to touch upon each of them in a level of detail, but hopefully you learn enough here to follow up with us afterwards. Alex, pull up that screen. There's our SaaS desktop. That's what it looks like. Let's go through Security Designer first and talk about how it can help you with designing roles, looking for the impact of security changes before they go to production, including the impact on licensing, and just give people an idea also how the task recordings they might have can be uploaded in Security Designer to ultimately allow them to see what security is required for a task they just recorded.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Frank mentioned, this is the home screen here for our FastPath Assure SaaS solution. On the left-hand side, you have the different modules. We'll start with our Security Designer here. Again, this is where you can go in. And it actually serves a couple different purposes. One is helping you design security from compliant security, where you're going in and looking at making changes to security and then seeing the impact of those changes from a segregation of duties as well as a licensing scenario, and then also being able to upload your task recordings to be able to see what security do I actually need. So when we're looking at design security, we have this idea of security models. This is kind of like a sandbox or a test area where you can actually make your changes and run a risk analysis to basically see what are the impact of those changes. So I could come into our demo instance here and be able to pull up our roles, duties, and privileges. This is actually going to go out and make a live call to our F&O environment that our FastPath instance is connected to, and actually make a live call, pull back all of your roles, duties, and privileges that are assigned here. And so for each role in this case that we are looking at, we can see the name of the role, the label, and then the description, as well as the duties, privileges, tables, and sub roles that are assigned. If I actually want to go in and modify this accountant role, right, the duties that are assigned, I could pull this up, right? And now I could go in and start looking at duties in the system here, and I could go ahead and I could make a change and actually assign this duty to this role. If I wanted to revoke it, right, I could toggle this off, right? So we're trying to make this process a little bit easier here. The same thing at the privilege level. If you wanted to assign a privilege to this role, if you go down to the table level, this will actually show you the object assignment where you could go in and get down into your read, update, create, delete, right? And be able to assign your grant, deny, and unset just like you could in the user interface, right? But again, we're just trying to make that process a little bit easier from that perspective. You can also do things like cloning a role, duty, or privilege at any point in time. You could simulate what would happen if you removed a role, duty, or privilege. You can absolutely create a new role, duty, or privilege at any time. One other thing over here that I wanted to show is this affected objects. One question we get quite often is, if I make a change to this role, duty, or privilege, what other objects am I going to impact in the system, right? So if we run this at a role level here, this will actually pull back all the users that are assigned to this particular role, right? So I know if I make a change as accountant role, I'm going to be impacting all of these different users. If I go in and I run that same process down at a privilege level, right, this is actually going to show me the hierarchy-based structure to say what duties, roles, and users am I going to be impacted. So if I ran this for this particular privilege here, this is actually going to show me this privilege is assigned this duty, these roles, and all these users, right? So I know if I make a privilege to this or make a change to this privilege, right, I'm going to be impacting all of these objects in the system, right? So that's a great insight to have before you make any of those changes. The other thing that we can show down at this level, again, just like at the duty or role level, you can create a new privilege from scratch. The other thing that you can do here is use task recordings to help create these, right? And this is where that ability that Frank mentioned to be able to utilize that native task recording functionality within F&O to actually help you drive security, right? So if we jump over really quick here to our task recordings area, I've uploaded a couple task recordings already, but these are native piece of functionality within finance and operations, right, where you can go in and actually record yourself performing a task within the system itself. Normally, these are going to be used for testing or documentation purposes, but you can utilize these to also help you set up security. So what we can do is we can analyze the output of those task recordings and look in to say what objects were actually touched or consumed during that particular process, and therefore what objects would need to be assigned to the user to be able to perform that task. So for example, I went out and created a customer and I recorded myself doing that. I could then upload that into FastPath here, and I can see very quickly that I'm going to need these two particular menu item displays assigned to my user. I'm going to need those assigned at the create level, right? And I can also see what license is going to be required for those, right? So I can see that in this case, that would require an operations level license to be able to perform that task. Now I could go and I could take this, create customer task recording and create a new privilege just with those two particular menu items, or I can actually run this against my current security and say, okay, which current roles, duties, and privileges actually give me the permission to perform this particular task. So if I go in and run this from a role perspective, right, since there are two objects in this task recording, all of these particular roles that we're showing here actually give you the permission to create a customer. So if I were to assign any of these roles to a user, right, they would actually be able to perform this task, right? And I can do the same thing at a duty or privilege level as well to go down to that level of detail. So you can take this and run it against your current security, or you can take and you can go down to your security models and actually utilize this when you're creating this, right, to actually create a new privilege from that, right? So there's two different ways you can go about that, utilizing that task recording. The last piece of this is this analysis piece, right? So once I go through and start making my changes, right, now I want to be able to go in and say, okay, what's the actual impact of these changes? And so this will do that before and after comparison to actually show you where was my security and before I made the changes, where's that after, and how does that impact our segregation of duties and our licensing, right? And so that's where we can come in and be able to say, both from a role and a user perspective, where have my changes been made from the risk perspective, right, from my segregation of duties, as well as the licensing impact, right? So this gives you that insight into where those particular, where those changes, right, could actually bring impact or introduce or maybe reduce risk in your organization. So the final piece of this is once you go through all this process, right, you can absolutely publish this out into your F&O instance, and it becomes live security. So everything we've done up until this point, right, would be stored within FastPath. And then once you actually publish it, then it would become live security within F&O.
Yeah, good stuff there, Alex. And again, the task recordings, be able to see the impact of your security changes before you publish them out. Critical stuff. If you really want to be a superhero, you better figure out how to check this stuff out before you hit the button to say publish, push that live. So excellent. Let's jump to another module. This one, a lot of people think of FastPath, think of segregation duties or SOD. Let's briefly walk through the SOD functionality we have, talk about our SOD rule set, and then you're going to show probably user SOD conflict reports and role SOD conflict reports, which are pretty much the same, just a different focus, but walk people through that as well. Again, here, we're doing analysis down to the object level, which is the lowest possible piece of security you can look at inside Dynamics. Critical you do that so you don't have false positives or false negatives. But let's first talk about this SOD rule set you have up on the screen there.
Yeah, so one of the key differences between FastPath and other solutions here is that we're going to provide you an out-of-the-box rule set. The one that I'm showing here that gets delivered has 115 different rules in it. And this is coming from our internal audit team, as well as feedback from our customers and other audit partners, right, over the last 18 years to help give you the best starting point, right, within your organization, because then you can take this listing, you can modify it, you can add to it, remove from it to fit your particular business needs. And like Frank mentioned, we go down to the object level when we're doing our analysis, right? So these conflicts are built on what's called our business processes, which are just collections of objects that allow you to perform a task or process, right? So these are built on top of the actual objects. So we're talking menu items, tables, data entry, service operations, right, that allow you to perform that task or process. And this gives you the highest accuracy when you're looking at where is risk within my organization. So we're going to be able to give you obviously a name for a particular conflict and a conflict description as well. And then you're going to be able to come over, if we scroll over just slightly here, you're going to have the business cycle and then a risk level tied to this as well, right? So this gives you the ability then to categorize your SOD risks, right? So you can come in and actually be able to have an order of operations when you're going in to address these as well. So this is the out of the box rule set. Again, you can modify this. But what we would do then is we would, as part of our conflict reports that we're going to look at here, right? This would be where you would take the access reports or the user access, role access data, run it against this rule set, be able to generate where SOD risks are. So that's how we generate our role conflict and user conflict reports. If we go ahead and look at a user conflict report really quick, we can use a test user here to actually generate this. We can pick a company, a user, and as you can see, you can have multiple rule sets. If we go ahead and run this, right, we're going to be able to very quickly say, based on all of the roles that Alicia users assigned in the Katoso Consulting Company and the access that user has, running against that rule set that we just looked at, where do we have risks for this particular user? So we're able to very quickly generate the risk here. We're able to see the name of the conflict, the description of the conflict, the risk level, the company that this conflict resides in. If we go ahead and click on this, over on the right-hand side, we're actually going to be able to see how the user is getting access to these, right? So we're going to be able to see in this case, it's actually coming from one role. The buying agent role actually has an inherent conflict between receiving transactions and create or change payable invoices, right? And we're able to go down again to that object level to be able to see what objects this user has access to that is causing this particular conflict. Right now, when we come to this report, we're able to make a business decision on how we want to address this, right? Do we want to go in and change security on the user? Do we want to change the actual security the user's assigned, right? Or do we actually want to go in and say, we know the user has this access, but we want to provide this mitigating control around this because the user needs this for the day-to-day operations, right? And this is where you can go into the grid itself here and actually provide a mitigating control for this particular user based on a control library that you have, right? So you could say, maybe we're going to have a manager sign off and transaction sampling, right, to help actually address this. We can provide any notes that we need to include here. We can set a status for this particular user conflict. We can mitigate additional companies or legal entities in this case, and then we can go ahead and mitigate the conflict. And now, once we do this, right, the mitigation for this conflict is going to be tied to this conflict itself. So you can see the status changed. If we open this back up, we can see an entire history of this, right, and when this was done going forward, right? So now you have a piece of data you can hand to your auditors and say, yes, we know the user has this conflict, but here's what we're doing to mitigate this, right? So that's the ability that we can bring from a documentation standpoint for your auditors to be able to address issues like this.
Yes, and that's looking at from the user side, a couple of things that really make you a superhero there. One, get down to that object level. Two, that level of detail you showed to prove exactly where that conflict's coming from inside Dynamics. Similar report exists on the role side. One thing I think we forgot to mention, Alex, is how many out-of-the-box SOD conflicts are in the native Dynamics SOD role set?
Yeah, so there's 0 out of the box from Microsoft, and then
0.
And then the other part to that is they only go down to the duty level, right? So within the role duty privilege hierarchy compared to the object level, right? So that's where we are able to eliminate a lot of the false positives, false negatives that you would get if you were using the out-of-the-box Microsoft methodology.
That's 0 is never something to make you a superhero. 0 does not equal hero. So we have a similar report on the role side, right? But again, it's when you're looking for conflicts inside roles. You may assign to users, does the same thing. All these reports inside FastPath, and we're going to show more here in a second. You can schedule, you can sign off on the report inside of FastPath. You can export them out, right, to PDF, multiple formats as well. So standard functionality across the board. We'll get about 10 minutes here. Let's really quick show from an access reviews perspective, user access and role access reports. Again, 2 different ways to look at it, similar SOD. But you want to see what users have access to inside Dynamics, just fire up this user access report, right? Pretty simple. Walk us through what you just did there. And again, there's a similar report on the role side.
Yeah, so this is the data that our segregation of duties is built on, right? So when we are running those segregation duties reports, right, we have to have the access that the user has behind the scenes. And so this is where we're able to generate those. So the access reviews is kind of the base report here that our segregation duties uses. So again, I'm able to do some pre-filtering, basically say, I want to run this report from this Alicia user in the Katoso Consulting Company, looking at menu items, displays in this case. And now I'm able to say, based on all the roles the Alicia user has, here's where this user has access. So I can see the object label and name, the access type, And then if I go ahead and click on this, right, I can actually see the role, in this case, just a single role that this user is getting this access from. So down to the duty and privilege as well, right? So this is the data that is being utilized when we're looking at from a segregation duties perspective. And again, like Frank mentioned, you can do the same thing from the role side.
And that's from a report perspective too. Now you're showing some detail on the right, but we have standard and detailed versions of these user role reports as well. Correct, Alex?
Yeah.
So if you want to get down to the detail. Yeah.
Right. So if you want to bring in that additional information into the grid itself, right, instead of having it off on the right-hand pane, right, you can absolutely do the same report that we were just looking at, right? I can run, and now you're bringing in all of the role, duty, privilege information into the grid itself.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So to answer those really finite questions, to show you truly are a superhero, understand where your security data is at, assign dynamics, that level of detail is there. We also have functionality for access search. We're not going to show that today, but it gives you the ability to periodically do reviews of users' access, and you can set up schedules for that. It can also, after you do it the first time, set up the next time you review it. It's going to show you what's changed from the first time to make the level of review a little bit less. Again, a pretty swift functionality there. So in the last 6.5 minutes here, let's touch upon the Audit Trail module, Alex. You want to track changes of critical data in Dynamics. Dynamics is a configurable system first. Lots of parameters, lots of settings, lots of things that you might want to track changes to. We make it easier because we have some out-of-the-box templates to track changes to different types of data that most commonly people want to watch, but also you can build custom templates. Walk us through that briefly.
Yeah, so our Audit Trail solution, right, is utilized to track what users are doing with their security, right? So what changes they're actually making. And one key point here is that we are completely separate from the database log, right? So you don't have to turn the database log on. We don't use any database log functionality for us to function. We have a completely separate methodology that we utilize, the event system within Microsoft to actually capture changes at the table level. And then based on the tracking templates that we're looking at here, we'll determine whether or not we actually have to capture that event. So these tracking templates are utilized to determine which table and fields you'd like to capture. We have some out of the box, I think about 27 different templates out of the box that you can take that are around, again, where our auditors went in and said, here's where we see customers wanting to capture changes. And then you can modify these, right? If you want to create your own tracking templates around any table within the AOT, you can absolutely do that. Table or field, doesn't matter if it's out of the box, custom, third party, you can absolutely do that, right? So this gives you that flexibility to go in and capture those particular changes, right? So you can go down and actually look, and you can get down to the event type on a particular field if you'd like to, right? If you want to get super granular on what you're capturing, right? So you can go down and be very thorough on where you actually want to capture this data. So once you go through and actually determine which tables and fields you'd like to capture, the events you'd like to capture, right, you can apply the tracking templates into F&O, and then you can go ahead and start capturing data. One key thing here is that the Audit Trail data for your F&O instance always lives within your F&O instance, right? It never gets brought over to FastPath. We never see that, and that was the design decision, right? Because we don't want to be looking at or being in charge of any what could be potentially sensitive financial information, right? And so when we are running these types of reports on any of the Audit Trail data, we're making a live call from FastPath into F&O to actually surface this data, right? So all of this data that we're going to be looking at here is within an F&O instance, right? And we're making a live call from this. But our data changes report here, it's kind of our base report that shows the data changes that we're capturing. You're going to be able to see the date and time the change occurred on, the table and column the change occurred on, the event type, so insert, update, or delete, the description of the change, all the new value, who made the change, and the company that the change occurred in, right? So you're going to be able to get all that information about the actual change itself. So this is your base report. And then we have a number of other out of the box reports that go and get additional information. So for example, if we can see we have some vendor changes here at the top. If I go ahead and run our all vendor changes report, you're going to notice we're looking at the same data, but again, we're able to bring in additional information like the account of the vendor, the name of the vendor, right? And so that just gives you a little bit more information about the actual changes that are occurring here, right? So we have a number of other reports here, things around a lot of master data, parameter types changes, user role changes. Another big one is sysadmin changes, right? That we get asked about quite often, workflow changes, right? Things like that. So, and then you can take and you can customize. If you want to create a custom report, you can absolutely do that with a report generator function to actually help with that process as well. Yeah,
really powerful stuff there. Again, doesn't impact your performance. compared to the database log and has the flexibility to track changes to anything really in the SQL database. I just realized if you want to be a superhero, you better stay on top of licensing, Alex. And I neglected to point you in the direction of the licensing reports that are part of the segregation duty access review module. So go ahead and briefly show what we have on licensing there. We have lots of customers that just run our solution just to look at licensing and identify literally tens and in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars where they've over provisioned security from a licensing perspective, because every change in security can impact licensing. So talk to us about these reports real quick.
Yeah, so we have a number of reports from a user role, duty, privilege level, right? We go to all the different levels where licensing can be applied here to be able to give you, additional insight into what licenses are actually going to be required. Licensing within F&O is kind of complex. I have a number of blog posts and YouTube videos about how this is actually determined. But the idea is that there's two different licensing types. There's the entry point based licensing, so your team member activity operations, and then at the operations level, we break that out into the license SKUs, right? And so it can be very confusing for customers, especially if they don't completely understand the process, right, to be able to determine what licenses do I actually need. So these reports give you that visibility. We have overview reports to be able to go in and say, okay, what licenses are going to be required for a particular role. In this case, right, based on the current security. And then we can go and look at detailed reports, right, from both the entry point based side as well as the SKU side or the privilege based licensing side, right? So if we go down to the SKU details here, right, we're able to see this role is assigned to this privilege, so therefore it requires this particular license, right? So we can go all the way down to actually see that process, as well as the detailed information here where we're able to go in and say this role is going to be assigned this particular object at the end of the day, right? And that's going to be required to have this license, right? So we can look at it from both sides and be able to show you that detailed information on why a particular, in this case, role, right, is requiring that particular license. And we can do the same thing from the user side as well. We have the same licensing reports. One additional thing on the user side is that's where your licensing are actually going to be applied, or licenses would be applied. And so we actually have a base attached counts report here, which is going to go in and say, based on your current user assignments, user access that is assigned, right, here are the licenses that are going to be required, right? So we can go in and be able to take this to Microsoft and say, okay, we're going to need 26 base and no attached for the finance, 20 base and 4 attached for the SCM, et cetera, right? So you can actually utilize this to help with your licensing renewals with Microsoft.
Yeah, very powerful stuff. If there's one thing you take out of the session today is FastPath can help you with your licensing, period, and help you work with Microsoft to get your licensing correct and your true up. So we're running up against the end of the time here, Alex. Just click on our Identity Manager module. Give an idea what the drop down looks like. Again, it's compliant user provisioning, setting up new users, changing existing users, tracking emergency access, folks you've given sysadmin to and the like. All that's built into the tool and reports out of it accordingly. Just a little bit easier than maybe using manual systems or ticketing systems you have. This is all built inside our solution. And then real quick to wrap up, Alex, and I'll go ahead and share my screen here if you want to cancel out of your screen there. Is if you have any questions for me or Alex, just reach out to us. Here's our contact information, and we can certainly help you out in that regard. Go fastpath.com to learn more about FastPath as a company. If you do have detailed questions, anything you saw today, please reach out to us individually, and we'll follow up with you and address your questions accordingly, because everyone needs to move from a security zero to a security hero, and FastPath is a way to allow you to accomplish that in a quick, easy manner, consistent manner, automated, and make your lives and your company's lives a whole lot easier around security and the ability to answer those 3 questions we talked about at the beginning. So I appreciate your time today. Enjoy the rest of Dynamics Con, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Lots of good stuff, a lot of content there. We want to thank everyone for attending. As Alex and I mentioned at the end, you may have questions about FastPath, please reach out to us directly. You see our email addresses there on the screen. We'll put them in the chat as well. Alex, really quick here before we wrap up, talk about some of those great resources you have just around security as a Microsoft MVP, your blog and the like, and where people can find out information about that in addition to everything about FastPath we already talked about.
Absolutely. So I have a number of different blogs. The easiest way to find it is the link I posted in chat, msftcloudblogs.com, so Microsoft Cloud Blogs. You can also find it at d365foblog.com. Those are two free resources. I write about all sorts of educational stuff. And then, like Frank mentioned during the presentation, I also have my book available on Amazon.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at
Thanks,
the booth.
everyone.